Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, Chapter 9, answers by citing the Lord's version. Text number 29. Bhagavat chikshitam aham karavani yatandritaha nehamana praja sargam badheyam yad anugrahat. Bhagavat chikshitam aham karavani yatandritaha nehamana praja sargam badhyeyam yad anugrahat. Bhagavat chikshitam aham karavani yatandritaha nehamana praja sargam badhyeyam yad anugrahat. Badhyeyam yad anugrahat. Bhagavat, by the personality of Godhead. Shikshitam, taught. Aham, myself. Karavani, by acting. He, certainly. Atandrita, instrumental. Na, never. Ihamana, although acting. Prajasargam, generation of the living entities. Badhyeyam, be conditioned. Yat, as a matter of fact. Anugrahat, by the mercy of. Translation. This is Lord Brahma speaking to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Please tell me, so that I may be taught in the matter by the instruction of the Personality of Godhead, and may thus act instrumentally to generate living entities without being conditioned by such activities. Purport. Brahmaji does not want to become a speculator dependent on the strength of his personal knowledge and conditioned to material bondage. Everyone should know in clear consciousness that one is, in the execution of all activities, an instrument. A conditioned soul is instrumental in the hands of the external energy, Gunamaya Maya, or the illusory energy of the Lord. And in the liberated stage, the living entity is instrumental to the will of the Personality of Godhead directly. To be instrumental to the direct will of the Lord is the natural constitutional position of the living entity, whereas to be an instrument in the hands of the illusory energy of the Lord is material bondage for the living entity. In that conditioned state, the living entity speculates on the absolute truth and his different activities. But in the unconditioned stage, the living entity directly receives knowledge from the Lord, and such a liberated soul acts flawlessly without any speculative habit. The Bhagavad Gita 10:10-11 confirms emphatically that the pure devotees who are constantly engaged in the loving transcendental service of the Lord are directly advised by the Lord. So much so that the devotee unwaveringly makes progress on the path back home, back to Godhead. Pure devotees of the Lord are therefore not proud of their definite progress, whereas the non-devotee speculator is in the darkness of illusory energy and is very much proud of his misleading knowledge based on speculation without any definite path. Lord Brahma wanted to be saved from that pitfall of pride, although he was posted in the most exalted position within the universe. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Jena Tasma Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Translation again. Please tell me so that I may be taught in the matter by the instruction of the personality of Godhead, and may thus act instrumentally to generate living entities without being conditioned by such activities. Up until now in the chapter we've heard, as we spoke in the previous class, about the dream of material existence, how the living entity is under the influence of the illusory energy, dreaming that he is the body and that everything in relation to the body is his. That's the nature of the false ego, or the bodily conception of life produced by contact with Krishna's illusory energy. Aham mameti, I am this body, and everything in relation to this body is mine. That, of course, is a dream, because we're not this body, and nothing is ours. Everything belongs to Krishna. But as we heard, that when we become re-established in our constitutional position as loving servants of the Lord, then we wake up from this dreamlike illusory condition and we begin to actually enjoy life. We relish the Bhakti rasa, the transcendental flavors of loving relationship with Krishna. So that is our mission in this human form of life, to wake up from the illusions of material life and regain our non-material glory as loving servants of the Lord. In this chapter we hear the Chatushloki Bhagavatam, the original Bhagavatam in 4 verses spoken by Lord Krishna to Lord Brahma at the beginning of the creation. And leading up to that particular event, we have Lord Brahma's tapasya and his consequent revelation by the Supreme Lord. He had the darshan of the Vaikuntha planets and the direct darshan of the Supreme Lord himself. And the Supreme Lord congratulated him for his execution of tapa, austerity, in devotional service, and explained that actually that tapa, that pure devotional service, is his life and soul. It's non-different from him. It's his internal potency. Then we have Lord Brahma asking questions to the Supreme Lord, and those questions will be answered in the Chatushloki Bhagavatam, the Bhagavatam in 4 verses. In today's verse, we have Lord Brahma inquiring how he can act instrumentally in his service. His service is to generate living entities. And so, being the original living entity in this universe, Lord Brahma he's a smart guy, and he understands the dangers of material existence. He asks that he may be taught in the matter personally by Krishna, and he taught how to do his particular service of generating living entities, how he can be aware of his position as simply an instrument to the Lord's creation. Previously he asked the Lord about how he creates, maintains and annihilates the material universe. Lord Brahma understands that he's just a secondary creator The actual creator is the Supreme Lord. And he himself can be just an instrument in this act of creation. So he's asking in this verse, how can I remain always alert to the reality that I'm simply an instrument? How can I avoid being conditioned by my activities? So this is the prayer of a sincere devotee. How can I perform my service, whatever that service may be, in Krishna consciousness, in the awareness that I'm simply an instrument to the will of the Lord. You may remember in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gave this instruction to Arjuna, Nimitta matram bhava savyasachan. My dear Arjuna, just become an instrument in this fight. Actually, I've already done everything. I've already killed all the soldiers here, with the exception of you Pandavas. Everybody on this battlefield will die. I've already arranged that. And I'd like you to be my instrument in that particular outcome. That's how I'd like you to relate to my plan. And of course, at the end of the Gita, Arjuna agrees. Nashta moha smritir labda tat prasadad mayachchuta stitosmi gata sandeha karishe vachanam tava. O Krishna, O infallible one, my illusion is now gone. By your mercy, I've regained my memory of my relationship with you, of my constitutional position as your instrument. I'm now firm and free from doubt, and I'm going to act according to your instructions. That is what it means to be Krishna conscious. To be free from the illusions of the dreamlike material existence, the illusions of I and mine. And to be aware of one's actual position as the eternal servant of the Lord. To be aware that only by Krishna's mercy can I do anything worthwhile. To be firm in one's perception of what is to be done for Krishna, what Krishna wants me to do. To be free from all doubts about that, and then to act according to Krishna's instructions. That is the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita. So Lord Brahma, as a sincere devotee, he's praying to Krishna. Basically, I've got this big service. And it's a service in which I could easily think myself something great. It's a service in which I could fall victim to the pitfall of pride. Pride is something that we always have to keep an eye on, because it's the basis of our material existence. There's that saying, colloquial saying, pride comes before a fall. So even in the existential sense, that is the cause of our fall from Krishna consciousness. Thinking that we're something other than we are, thinking we're something other than the insignificant servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. Thinking that I can enjoy separate from Krishna. I can control separate from Krishna. I will be successful without Krishna. This is the basis of our material existence. and the pride of the conditioned soul. So today we're going to try to address this rather delicate subject of the pitfall of pride. It's, as we said, something we always have to keep an eye on. The nature of the false ego is that it always wants to assert itself, and the sincere devotee has to be mindful of that at all times. So we're looking at these, we're approaching these 4 seed verses of the Bhagavatam, because we may wonder, well, why should we focus on this particular quality of pride in Bhakti Yoga? Maybe we should just talk about something positive all the time. And of course, we should talk about the positive of Krishna consciousness. Without knowing the positive, then we'll have no real good reason to give up the negative. As Krishna explains in the 2nd chapter of the Gita, Param drishtva nivartate. When you experience the positive, then you can give up the negative. At the same time, we also have to know what the negative is and why it's actually negative. If we go to the last verse of the Chatushloki Bhagavatam, we hear Krishna explaining the process of sadhana bhakti. And he says, Anvaya vyatireka bhyam yatsyat sarvatra sarvada. He says you should search for the truth of prema bhakti by the means of sadhana bhakti in all times and places, both directly and indirectly. What does this mean? To search for the truth, this highest truth of prema bhakti, directly and indirectly? It means you search for the truth both through things that are favourable to that goal and things that are unfavourable. In other words, things that are positive, that will help you attain the goal, and also things that are negative, things that are impediments to the goal, things that are getting in the way of attaining the goal. So Krishna explains, sadhana bhakti is simultaneously a positive and negative process. You can't just stress the positive. If you do that, you will probably turn into a sahajya. And you also can't just stress the negative. If you do that, then you'll probably turn into a mayavadi. You have to look at both sides. You have to have a balanced approach. And so both of these aspects we see discussed in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. For example, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Nectar of Devotion, you have Rupa Goswami explaining the 64 items of sadhana bhakti. The first 10 of those items are positive items, like approaching a spiritual master. The second 10 items are negative, like avoiding offences. This is anvaya vyatireka bhyam, searching for the truth both directly and indirectly. So sometimes discussing the indirect or the negative aspects, the impediments to attaining the goal of prema bhakti, can be a little challenging. As I said, it's a delicate topic. Can be a little challenging, can be a little maybe even frightening. But it is a legitimate and essential part of the process. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada explained that there are 2 types of Krishna Katha. discussing the positive of the spiritual world and the negative of the material world. And he explained that if devotees don't do this, they don't discuss both aspects, then they will become weak and fall down. So with that said, we're going to try to address the pitfall of pride through the example here of Lord Brahma, who does not want to be a victim of that pitfall. So, the quality of pride, Krishna delineates in the Gita as a demoniac quality, and actually the first of the demoniac qualities that he mentions in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. He says pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness and ignorance, these qualities belong to those of demoniac nature, O son of Pritha. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, in this verse, the royal road to hell is described. The demoniac want to make a show of religion and advancement in spiritual science, although they do not follow the principles. They are always arrogant or proud in possessing some type of education or so much wealth. They desire to be worshipped by others and demand respectability, although they do not command respect. Over trifles they become very angry and speak harshly, not gently. They do everything whimsically according to their own desire, and they do not recognize any authority. So, obviously in this class we're not talking to demons, we're talking to devotees. But unless devotees are actually reasonably advanced on the path of sadhana, then these demoniac qualities will be things that need to be addressed in order to clear the path. And we see even in extremely advanced devotees, this pitfall of pride can manifest. The most perhaps surprising example is the Rasa Leela. You remember that Krishna was playing his flute on the bank of the Yamuna at Vamsivat. All the gopis had left their homes in the middle of the night and rushed to Krishna. Some of them couldn't even dress properly. Some of them left their household chores and they just rushed to Krishna in the middle of the night through the Vrindavan forest to answer the call of his flute. And there was some interesting discussions there between Krishna and the gopis, with Krishna kind of teasing the gopis. It's the perverted reflection you see in this world of boys liking to tease girls. And then they began the rasa dance. But after some time, the gopis, Shukadev Goswami says, became proud. And as a result of that pride, Krishna left them. And Srila Prabhupada explains in the Bhagavatam, or in the Krishna book, that Krishna does not like to see pride in his devotees. And if he does see it, he changes his attitude towards the devotee. He doesn't like one devotee to become proud of his service, thinking that he's better or she's better than the other devotees. So if Krishna sees that, he changes his attitude towards the devotee. In the case of the gopis, he left the rasa dance. So this is surprising that extremely exalted devotees who are personally dancing with Krishna could manifest pride. Now, there are some caveats to the pride of the gopis. One caveat is that their pride was basically pride in Krishna, because they were considering, we are the most fortunate women in the universe. We are dancing with the all-attractive Supreme Person. So in that sense, they were actually proud of Krishna, which is legitimate pride. Just like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, you hear about Advaita Acharya's pride in Lord Chaitanya. He would be taking prasadam, and then he would just spontaneously leap up, jump in the air, and chant, Chaitanya Dasa Muni, Chaitanya Dash, Chaitanya Dash Muni, Tanya Dash Dash. I'm a servant of Lord Chaitanya. I'm a servant of Lord Chaitanya. I'm a servant of Lord Chaitanya and a servant of his servants. That is pride. But it's pride in Lord Chaitanya. And it's pride in the servants of Lord Chaitanya. It's legitimate pride. Everything is there in the spiritual world. So we have the term false pride. That means when you're proud of something that you shouldn't be proud of. That's a perverted reflection of real pride in the spiritual world as displayed by Advaita Acharya and the gopis. They were proud of Krishna. Krishna is the supreme male, and we have the incredible good fortune of being able to personally dance with him. Another caveat to the gopis' pride is that it was a manifestation of Krishna's Leela Shakti, Krishna's pastime potency, which generated that feeling in the minds of the gopis. Why? One reason is that Krishna wants to glorify the gopis by showing their unparalleled example of pure love. What happened when Krishna left them? They went mad and displayed all the super ecstatic symptoms of Mahabhava, imitating Krishna's pastimes, asking all the trees and the creepers in Vrindavan forest, had they seen Krishna, the son of Maharaj Nanda, asking the deer, have you seen Nanda Nandana, the son of Maharaj Nanda, pass this way? He has left us because of our pride. They literally went mad in separation from Krishna. And Krishna wants to show the world, to glorify the gopis, and to show the actual standard of pure love. So that's another reason that pride manifested in the minds of the gopis by the influence of Yogamaya. Krishna wants to glorify his pure devotees. He wants to show just how attached they are to him, how they cannot conceive of anything in the world actually existing when they have that viraha bhava, that feeling of separation from Krishna. Yugayitam namishena, chakshusha pravishaitam, shunyayatam jagat sarvam, Govinda virahaname. O Govinda, as Lord Chaitanya prays, feeling your separation, I'm considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in this world in your absence. That is the viraha bhava of the gopis, the gopi bhava. That intense feeling of separation from Krishna. So Krishna wanted to show that and glorify the gopis in that way, and therefore he left them. Another caveat is that Krishna not only wanted to glorify them by leaving them, but he also wanted to give them that highest ecstasy, that highest ecstasy of viraha, transcendental separation from him. Because the feeling of meeting Krishna is certainly super ecstatic, but the feeling of separation from Krishna is even more intense. That's what we see in Mahaprabhu's Ansha Lila. He specifically came as within his internal purpose to relish that Vipralamba Bhav, that Gopi Bhava of intense separation from Krishna. And that is the highest ecstasy, believe it or not, according to the Acharyas. Even greater than the ecstasy of meeting Krishna is the ecstasy of feeling separation from Krishna. So for that reason also Krishna left them, and in order to leave them, you could say, catalyst to that, or the pretext to that was that they became proud. That gave Krishna a reason to leave them. And in this way, he benedicted them with that highest form of bhakti. And finally, another caveat to the pride of the gopis was that not only was it a pretext for them to experience that highest mahabhava of separation from Krishna, but it was also a pretext to Krishna wanting to be alone with Srimati Radharani. Because in the rasa dance, Krishna was dancing with all the gopis. He expanded himself to dance with all the girls. So Srimati Radharani was feeling that her exclusive position was being diminished or not recognized. So she left the dance. And when she leaves the dance, then Krishna's not satisfied. Because she is Govinda Nandini Radha, Govinda Mohini, Govinda Sarvasva, Sarvakanti Shiromani. She is the crest jewel of all the lovely consorts of the Lord. Govinda Anandini, she's the one who gives pleasure to Govinda. Govinda Mohini, she bewilders Lord Krishna. Govinda Sarvasva, she is the be-all and end-all of Govinda. Sarvakanti Shiromani, she's the crest jewel of all his lovely consorts. So without her, Krishna can't be happy. Even with so many other gopis who are all her expansions. Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavi Tabi, Tabirya Eva Nijarup Pataya Kalabi. They're all her expansions, but still he can't be satisfied without her. So she felt her position was being diminished in the dance because Krishna was dancing with all of the girls, so she left. And so Krishna, on the pretext of leaving the gopis because of their pride, left them. On the pretext of the gopis' pride, Krishna left them to be alone with Srimati Radharani. So that's another caveat to that pastime. And then, of course, he eventually left Srimati Radharani for the same reason. In turn, giving her that highest Krishna-conscious experience of Viraha Bhava. So this example of the Rasa Lila, it has many different facets, many different fascinating aspects, all based on the gopis' pride. Now, again, although all those different aspects to the gopis' pride or different caveats are there, still, Srila Prabhupada explains in the Krishna book that Krishna doesn't like his devotees to be proud. And when a devotee thinks that he or she is better than other devotees, then Krishna changes his attitude towards the devotee, as he did with the gopis. So he does use that pastime as an example of how Krishna does not like his devotees to be proud, and even they can be such exalted devotees as the gopis. So how does this pride manifest for us? Well, as practicing devotees, easy ways to see it, if it's there, can be just not taking good advice. Sometimes we offer pranams, please accept my humble obeisances. We may even bow down on the ground, vancha kalpa tarubhyascha. But then when it comes to accepting good advice, we're not so open to that. Another example can be accepting feedback, ways that we can improve. Again, we can be very externally humble, but then when it comes to receiving feedback, we're also resistant to that or defensive. Now again, there's nothing wrong with offering pranams. That's good. It certainly could be a lot worse things we could do. But that's not the limit of humility, to simply make an external show. It's a good start, definitely, but there is much more that is actually much more significant in terms of manifesting genuine humility. So, if we're actually free from pride, we'll be looking for good advice. We'll be seeking it out. We'll be looking for feedback on how we can improve our service. We'll be seeking it out. We'll be looking for correction. I like Vaisheshika Prabhu's mantra, I live to be corrected. That's a beautiful mantra, that one. Another way we can see pride in ourselves is that if we're not given respect for our achievements, then we become resentful, angry, even vengeful. Right? Because we think, well, these are my achievements. I did this. Right? This is what Lord Brahma is concerned with. He doesn't want to fall into the trap of thinking, I am the doer. And this can manifest in any kind of service that we do. Maybe we're a cook and we think, well, everybody loves my cooking. I am the best cook. I am the best cook and everybody knows it. Right? Or we give a class. Everybody likes my classes. My classes are the best. I know the Shastra. I know everything that's in the books. Yep. Everybody thanks me after the class. Oh, that was a great class. Right. Kirtan, of course, that's a really easy one to trip up on. I'm the big Kirtan leader. Right. I am the real chanter of the holy name. Right. My musical abilities are causing everybody to become ecstatic. Right. Or I'm the big distributor of Krishna Prema. Right. I distribute so many books. I win the marathon. I won the marathon this year. Yeah, actually, practically every year I win the marathon. I'm empowered. Well, or actually, I'm so experienced. I'm such an experienced senior devotee. My guidance is just spot on. It's always just completely accurate. Basically, I'm fully in touch with the super soul at every moment, and I've got perfect perception. I know everything that's wrong with everybody in the community, basically. Now, the main problem is that there's not enough people coming to me for advice. Yeah, that's me. I'm going to be the next self-effulgent Acharya. Basically anything in which we think we can get a result in, any kind of service, any kind of practical activity, we can very easily just fall into this pitfall of pride, thinking that I'm the doer and these are my achievements. Remember, Lord Chaitanya has explained Trinadapi Sunichena Torodapi Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sada Hari. Someone who's actually solidly situated on the path of Bhakti, they chant the holy name in a humble state of mind. He gives the example of straw. It's like straw in the street, because when the straw is on the street, it can't get any lower. Like, it's as low as it can get, right? So he says that someone who's actually making real advancement in bhakti thinks themselves lower than the straw in the street. They have that accurate self-conception, and therefore they are toror eva sahishnuna. They're more tolerant than a tree. They can tolerate basically anything because they have that accurate self-conception. Amanina, they don't expect any respect for themselves, and manadena, they're prepared to offer all respect to others. He says, Kirtaniya Sada Hari. In this way, in this state of mind, with this mindset, to use a contemporary term, you can always chant the holy name, and your chanting will be not only continuous, but it will be offenceless. Offenceless because of that attitude. Humility, tolerance, respect for others, and pridelessness. So, if we are getting any results, external results, as a consequence of our service, whatever service that might be, whether it's cooking, classes, kirtans, book distribution, giving guidance, anything, a great way to stay humble, to avoid this pitfall of pride, is simply to look at your chanting. If we look at our chanting, particularly our japa, then we'll see there's always room for improvement. And we can ask ourselves the question, well, if I'm actually so great that I don't need any advice, I don't need any feedback from others, then why is my chanting so inattentive? Why am I not experiencing Nayanam Galadashru Daraya Varanam Gadgara Rudiyagira Pulakai Nichitam Bapukada Tavanam Grahane Bhavishyate? Lord Chaitanya prayed, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? That's actually what should happen when we chant Hare Krishna. If we're actually advanced, those symptoms should be there. Those symptoms of ecstasy, the Ashta Sattvika Vikar, the 8 ecstatic symptoms. If we're chanting and those symptoms are not there, we can understand that we still have quite a lot of work to do, probably. And that work begins with our attitude. So, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami speaks about this Trinadapi Sunichena verse, and he says that he appeals to everybody, all his readers in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he says, I beg you, please string this verse on a garland, on a thread of the holy name, and wear it round your neck for continuous remembrance. Continuous remembrance. Not just once a year or once every 6 months. Oh, that's right, the Trinadapi Sunichena verse. Yeah, good point, Mahaprabhu. Meanwhile, anyway, on with my program, on with my achievements. He says continuous remembrance. So, if we're serious, we should take that seriously. Krishna doesn't like pride. That is the point. And he wants to relieve us of that pride if we have it. We can choose to have ourselves relieved of pride the easy way. That's the way that Lord Brahma is demonstrating today. He's praying to Krishna, please protect me from that pitfall of pride. I don't want to fall into thinking I'm the doer. I want to just act as your pure instrument. I want to always remember that I'm simply instrumental to your will. That's the easy way of getting free from pride. Then, of course, there's the hard way. The hard way means Krishna has to help us by putting us through some trials and tribulations. It's not necessary, or we could say it's not mandatory, but for many of us it is actually necessary because we've got a lot of pride. And Krishna wants us to be free from that pride so we can exchange love with him, so we can actually relish the bhakti rasa. So Krishna will go to great lengths actually to relieve us from our false pride if we don't take the easy method and just voluntarily give it up, right? So there's the easy way to get free from pride, and there's also the hard way. If we have some false pride, then we can choose. Again, the easy way is demonstrated here by Lord Brahma. He's wanting to hear from Krishna about his glories. He's wanting to cultivate knowledge of Krishna. That is the easy way. Because when you hear about Krishna regularly and sincerely, then you see that I can't compete with Krishna. Krishna's the best at everything. Krishna has unlimited opulences. He's Bhagavan. I'm never going to be as wealthy as Krishna. I'm never going to be as famous as Krishna. I'm never going to be as strong as Krishna, either physically strong or through being able to influence others. I'm never going to be as as knowledgeable as Krishna. I'm never going to be as beautiful as Krishna. I'm never going to be as renounced as Krishna. Krishna has these 6 opulences in full. There's no way that I can compete with him. So if you just hear about that every day, as the Bhagavatam suggests, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, then all your pride just disappears. And of course you're also hearing about your own position. That's very humiliating. And that's of course why we don't want to do it. Let's just charge out there with our project, whatever it is. Let's make our mark in the world. Let's show all the devotees how expert we are at this particular service or these services. But hearing about Krishna, yeah, maybe sometime in the future. Maybe when I get old. But now I'm young, I've got heaps of energy. I want to hear something about me. I want to do something so that other people will glorify me. Now, of course, when we're new devotees, we don't really sort of pinpoint or shine a spotlight on the pitfall of pride. Because in one sense, it's just natural that when we're new devotees, that will be there. But as we become older devotees, if we haven't already, then we do really need to address our contaminations, shall we say. Say we've been around for, say, 15, 20 years, 25 years. If we haven't already addressed these things, then they will become big impediments. They'll become impediments to our service. They'll become impediments to our relationships with other devotees. We'll find ourselves isolated, not being able to connect with other sincere devotees, particularly peers. And as we were saying, Krishna may just give us a shake-up. Sometimes when Krishna does that, the devotee doesn't recover. It's just too much for the false ego. So we want to try and avoid that kind of scenario. Particularly if we're older, so-called older devotees. We want to work on ourselves. We want to make progress. We want to become Krishna conscious in all circumstances. So, what is humility? Humility, of course, is the opposite of pride. Prabhupada explains in the Bhagavad Gita, in the purport to chapter 13, text 8 to 12, because those texts explain the process of knowledge. So what does it actually mean to have knowledge, and what does it mean to cultivate knowledge? So Krishna explains that humility is the beginning of that process, and without humility, the process doesn't really begin. Because as long as one is proud, then how can one really be said to have any knowledge? Your knowledge begins by understanding I'm the insignificant servant of Krishna. That's the beginning of knowledge. In other words, as we hear in these verses coming up, the Chatushloki Bhagavatam, the first verse explains Krishna, and then the second verse explains Krishna's relationship to his energies. So the first verse we get an understanding of Krishna as being transcendental to the material energy. The second verse we get the understanding that Krishna's illusory energy creates an artificial separation between the living entities and Krishna and his energies. In other words, the living entity under the influence of illusion does not see the connection between all the energies of the Lord and the Lord himself. So these two verses encapsulate Sambandha Gyan, knowledge of the relationship between Krishna and his energies. Now, if we can cultivate, as we were saying, if we can cultivate that knowledge, we'll naturally become humble. Right? But even to begin cultivating that knowledge, there needs to be a minimum entry level of humility. Otherwise, we just won't do it at all. We just won't even begin the process. So what then is humility? Prabhupada explains in his purport to Bhagavad Gita 13:8-12. He says humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honoured by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honour from others, but from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge, who knows that he is not this body, anything, honour or dishonour, pertaining to this body is useless. One should not be hankering after this material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently, sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following religious principles, and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. As for actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far he is progressing. One can judge by these items. So then, Prabhupada begins commenting on all the other items in this process of knowledge, which begins with humility. And at the end of the purport he says, if anyone wants to compete with God and at the same time make advancement in spiritual knowledge, he will be frustrated. It is clearly stated that without humility, understanding is truly not possible. To think oneself God is most puffed up. Although the living entity is always being kicked by the stringent laws of material nature, he still thinks, I am God because of ignorance. The beginning of knowledge, therefore, is amanitva, humility. One should be humble and know that he is subordinate to the Supreme Lord. Due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, one becomes subordinate to material nature. One must know and be convinced of this truth. So then if one studies regularly, then, particularly the Sambandha Gyan, then one will be hearing this all the time, right? I'm not God, I'm subordinate to the Supreme Lord. Due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, I've become subordinate to material nature. So in this way, naturally, humility will arise. Now, the subsidiary point to pride is envy, because envy is born of pride. Once we think that we're the greatest, then we look around and we see that, well, not everybody agrees. And actually, other people, well, we may not admit it consciously that, they may have a point. There may be some good reason why they don't agree. But we see that they're competitors. We see others as competitors, right? And what happens when you see others as competitors to your crown as the supreme is that you want to cut them down, right? You develop this mood of envy, and that manifests as criticism, unnecessary criticism, anger, and revenge against those who we see as competitors to our greatness. And of course there are many examples of this in the Shastra, many examples, to illustrate how these things are impediments to bhakti. We just celebrated the Govardhan Leela, Krishna's possibly most famous pastime. And in that pastime, we see how a devotee, Indra, Lord Indra, the king of the heavenly planets, became envious of the residents of Vrindavan because they weren't acknowledging his greatness. Krishna stopped his puja, and because of his pride, Indra then manifested envy and became critical of Krishna, became critical of all the residents of Vrindavan, became angry and wanted to seek revenge. He ordered the Samvardhaka clouds to destroy all the Brijbasis simply because they just stopped some little puja to him. Quite an extraordinary example when you think about it. Now, Indra's already got so much opulence, so much power, and just some small village in India stopped this tiny little puja to him, and he just totally just went off the planet. But that's what pride will do. That's what envy will do. And of course in Chaitanya Lila we have so many examples as well. Gopal Chapal, he was a caste Brahmana who was locked out of the kirtans at Srivasangan. In the courtyard of Srivas Thakur's house, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all his devotees were engaged in ecstatic kirtan for 1 year, every night. But the caste Brahmanas who were not qualified to enter that kirtan were locked out. So this one man, Gopal Chapal, because of his pride, then became envious of Srivas Thakur and tried to defame Srivas Thakur. He tried to take revenge by putting these various items for worshipping Goddess Durga outside Srivas Thakur's house. And of course, as a result of that, he became afflicted with leprosy. Similar thing happened to Ramachandra Khan. Was it Ramachandra Khan? Gopal Chakravarti. Ramachandra Khan was another example, but Gopal Chakravarti, he was also a smarta Brahmin, very proud of his learning. He was youthful, he was beautiful, he was learned, but he was also very proud. So when he was invited to the home of Govardhan and Hiranya Majumdar to attend a discussion on Krishna and the holy name, he became upset and angry when Haridas Thakur, the Namacharya, began explaining that actually if you just chant the holy name, a byproduct of that chanting is liberation and freedom from all sinful reactions. So this man, Gopal Chakravarti, he could not tolerate this statement by Haridas Thakur, and he began criticizing Haridas Thakur. In this assembly, he said, look, listen to the emotional devotee. He doesn't know the actual conclusion of Shastra, that after millions of births, one may get free from sinful reactions, one may attain liberation. After millions of births of study, and he's just saying that just by chanting the holy name, even imperfectly, in Nama Bhasa, one can get these things. So he became very critical because of his envy of Haridas Thakur, which was based on his pride. Became angry, and a few days later he also got leprosy, and his beautiful face became deformed as a reaction to this manifestation of pride in the form of envy, criticism, anger. And then, of course, possibly the best example, or the most graphic example, Ramachandra Puri. Ramachandra Puri was a god brother of Lord Chaitanya's spiritual master, Ishvara Puri. They were both disciples of Madhavendra Puri, the great Mahabhagavat. So unlike Ishvara Puri, who pleased his spiritual master through menial service, particularly as the spiritual master was leaving his body, Ramachandra Puri started trying to instruct his spiritual master at that time. Madhavendra Puri was leaving his body and he was absorbed in these intense feelings of separation from Krishna. He was reciting a particular verse over and over again, explaining how he couldn't attain Mathura, he couldn't attain the lotus feet of Krishna. So this foolish disciple, foolish, proud disciple Ramachandra Puri began trying to instruct his own spiritual master at this time, saying to him, why are you lamenting? You're supposed to be in the consciousness of Brahman, understanding that you're Brahman. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatmana Shochati Nakangshati. You're supposed to be free from hankering and lamentation. Needless to say, this was not what Madhavendra Puri wanted to hear at his last moment. He said, not only could I not attain Mathura, but now I have to listen to this Mayavadi disciple instruct me about Brahman. It really doesn't get any worse than this. So he disowned Ramachandra Puri as a disciple. He withdrew his mercy from Ramachandra Puri, and after that Ramachandra Puri became a habitual fault finder and critic of devotees. The devotees, particularly of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He would attend a feast organised by the devotees, or invite devotees to a feast, and then he would feed them as much as possible. And because the devotees are trying to be gracious to their host, and they would eat as much as they could, and Ramachandra Puri would try to get them to eat more, and they would say, no, enough, but they would finally, when they couldn't eat any more, and Ramachandra Puri would start criticising them. These followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, these devotees of Mahaprabhu, I've heard that they eat too much, and now I'm seeing it in front of my own eyes, seeing it with my own eyes, that look how much they eat. They can't control. This means they will not be able to control their senses. They're just sense gratifiers. So he became a big critic. And then he committed the greatest offence by criticising Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. He went to Mahaprabhu's Bhajan Kutir one morning, and there were ants on the floor. So he began saying to Mahaprabhu, well, it's obvious you've been eating sugar candy because of these ants. They're here for the sugar candy. Of course, ants can be anywhere. Doesn't mean there's sugar candy there, but that was his particular vision. Because of his pride and his envy, that's how he saw things. So Mahaprabhu, he actually after that, he reduced his eating to a quarter of what he was usually eating. Ramachandra Puri told him that sannyasis, they should not gratify their senses. It's immediate fall down for a sannyasi if he eats too much, particularly sweets. So Mahaprabhu cut his eating down to a quarter. All the devotees of Mahaprabhu, when they heard this, they were just irate. They could not believe the audacity of Ramachandra Puri. And older devotees like Paramananda Puri, they went to Mahaprabhu and said, this Ramachandra Puri, he's just very, very critical, and you should not take him seriously. Please don't cut your eating down. And Mahaprabhu said, no, there's no reason to be upset with Ramachandra Puri. He's actually speaking for my benefit. He's right, actually, that sannyasis shouldn't eat too much. Mahaprabhu showing, as he did on many occasions, how to actually deal with a proud person and how to be a genuinely humble person. So then, eventually, because Ramachandra Puri had offended his spiritual master, Madhavendra Puri, who then withdrew his mercy, Ramachandra Puri just became a great offender to the devotees, to Mahaprabhu, and eventually he just left town and ruined his spiritual life. So this is the pitfall of pride. Pride turns into envy, envy turns into criticism, it turns into anger, revenge, inability to take good advice, inability to take feedback. It's a great impediment. Ultimately, it can lead to a lot of offences. Remember, Lord Chaitanya has said that the greatest impediment to your cultivation of the bhakti creeper is the mad elephant offence, hati mata. The gardener is growing a nice creeper in the garden, but then, with lots of care and attention, but then if an elephant enters in, that creeper is just destroyed, and all the hard work of the gardener is wasted. Similarly, if out of pride and envy one disregards the devotees, the sincere devotees of the Lord, one worse, tries to instruct them, particularly if they're seniors, as in the case of Ramachandra Puri. Of course, in terms of etiquette at that time, Ramachandra Puri was a god brother of Lord Chaitanya's spiritual master. So etiquette-wise, Lord Chaitanya was right in treating him with great respect, because one should treat the god brothers of one's spiritual master on the same level as one's spiritual master. At the same time, Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Ramachandra Puri was a great fault finder and offender to his own spiritual master and then to the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. So one has to be very careful of this pitfall of pride, which can lead to this mad elephant offence and destroy whatever good work we've done in our Krishna consciousness very quickly. Here in this verse today, Lord Brahma gives the solution. Cultivate knowledge of Krishna and pray to Krishna for protection from the pitfall of pride. Pray to Krishna that I simply want to be your instrument in this particular service. Please always let me stay in that consciousness of my actual position and who is actually the doer and the enjoyer of the results of this service. The next verse, Lord Brahma, in the next verse he says, O my Lord, the unborn, you have shaken hands with me, just as a friend does with a friend, as if equal in position. I shall be engaged in the creation of different types of living entities, and I shall be occupied in your service. I shall have no perturbation, but I pray that all this may not give rise to pride, as if I were the supreme. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, No one can be greater. No one is equal to or greater than the Lord. That is the version of the Bhagavad Gita. Brahmaji, although eternally related with the Lord in the transcendental humour of friendship, and although entrusted with the most exalted post of creating different grades of living entities, is still conscious of his position, that he is neither the Supreme Lord nor supremely powerful. It is possible that some extremely powerful personality within or without the universe may sometimes show more power than the Lord himself. Still, the pure devotee knows that this power is a vibhuti delegated by the Lord, and such a delegated, powerful living entity is never independent. Then Prabhupada gives the example of Hanuman. Hanuman crossed the ocean to Lanka, whereas Lord Ram walked across the stone bridge. But that doesn't mean that Hanuman is more powerful than Lord Ram. Sometimes the Lord gives extraordinary powers to his devotee, but the devotee knows always that the power belongs to the personality of Godhead, and that the devotee is only an instrument. The pure devotee is never puffed up like the non-devotee class of men who falsely think that they are God. It is astonishing to see how a person who is being kicked by the laws of the Lord's illusory energy at every step can falsely think of becoming one with the Lord. Such thinking is the last snare of the illusory energy offered to the conditioned soul. The first illusion is that he wants to become Lord of the material world by accumulating wealth and power. But when he is frustrated in that attempt, he wants to be one with the Lord. So both becoming the most powerful man in the material world and desiring to become one with the Lord are different illusory snares. And because the pure devotees of the Lord are surrendered souls, they are above the illusory snares of Maya. Because Lord Brahma is a pure devotee, even though the first dominating deity in the material world, and therefore able to do many wonderful things, he would never, like the non-devotee with a poor fund of knowledge, have the audacity to think of becoming one with the Lord. People with a poor fund of knowledge should take lessons from Brahma when they are puffed up with the false notion of becoming God. Factually, Lord Brahma does not create the living entities. In the beginning of the creation, he is empowered to give different bodily shapes to the living entities according to their work during the last millennium. Brahmaji's duty is just to wake the living entities from their slumber and to engage them in their proper duty. The different grades of living entities are not created by Brahmaji by his capricious whims, but he is entrusted with the task of giving the living entities different grades of body so that they can work accordingly. And still he is conscious that he is only instrumental, so that he may not think of himself as the supreme powerful Lord. The devotees of the Lord are engaged in the specific duty offered by the Lord, and such duties are successfully carried out without hindrance because they are ordained by the Lord. The credit of success goes not to the doer but to the Lord. But persons with a poor fund of knowledge take the credit of success into their own accounts and give nothing to the credit of the Lord. That is the symptom of the non-devotee class of men. Hare Krishna. So for our own purification, we've tried to address this topic, this delicate topic, the pitfall of pride. Hopefully we have done that in a sensitive way, in a way that is pleasing to Guru and Krishna, and helpful to the devotees